Next, we'll have our legislative session preparation. We'll go to legislative policy request first. We'll have Deputy Superintendent Stallings come up. And board members, we have basically an hour. Let's use our time wisely. So, Angie, I think we should split this.
Yeah.
So we'll
I'll
we'll
start.
go a half hour.
Yeah, you can. Okay. Great, thank you. I'm just logging in very quickly. Deputy Superintendent of Policy, Angie Stallings, and we're going to start off by providing a little overview of the session and what's to come. And then we will talk about 5 new policy requests that staff has submitted for your consideration. And after that, we will then turn over to the fiscal prioritization and review of fiscal requests. So while I am getting logged in here, we would like to introduce our new legislative intern first. Megan Russell, can you come on up here, Megan? And I'd love for her to just, in her own words, tell you a little bit about where she came from and how she came to be here with us. So go ahead, Megan.
Good morning. My name is Megan Russell. I grew up in Sandy, Utah. Graduated from Brighton High School. And I just most recently graduated from BYU, Hawaii with a bachelor's degree in political science. And I'm very excited to be here and to learn and see how things operate. So thank you for this opportunity.
And so some of you board members who started with us this year, we didn't have a legislative intern last year, but in prior sessions, we have had a legislative intern. So those of you who've been on the board for more than a year know how valuable it is to have a legislative intern. And so, Megan will be here to support all of us as well as all of you, and we're really excited to have her on our team. So thanks, Megan. And so now I'll just start by giving an overview of what you can look forward to as far as information and meetings related to this session. We've already begun by producing our tracking sheet on our website. And so that, if you go into the board's website, you go into the law and policy and professional practices section, then you will see a legislative page. I'm sure as we get closer to the legislative session, we'll have a banner that it will be easily clickable from the front page on the legislative session. But there you can see on our Utah legislative session page on our board webpage, we have a tracking sheet that's available that we've already started populating. Bills are getting numbered. This is what it looks like in paper form, but it is available on our website. That's updated during the session every day with the new bills that are numbered, and before the session, it'll be approximately every 2 to 3 days until the session starts. The tracking sheet is really a great resource. I was just going to give you an example. If you go to HB 99, which is Representative Snow's Enhanced Kindergarten Amendments bill, that's one of the board's priorities, as you know, our fiscal priorities, and was a bill that staff presented on your behalf to Education Interim Committee. You can see here that bill. And so it's very easy to find out information and access those bills very quickly. Another thing, by our first legislative meeting on January 30th that we'll have available is a SharePoint app that you all will have access to that you can just put right on your phone. And it will have committee meeting dates, and it'll put the agendas right there. It's very accessible, the calendar. The tracking sheet will be on there. So this is a great resource for employees and board members. It's not quite populated right now because we have no committee meetings with times set yet. But during that first legislative board meeting, when we're up at the Capitol, if you would like, we can help you figure out how to navigate that on your phone. Otherwise, that's probably the easiest way to find out which meetings are when and what bills are be on those. And just speaking of our legislative meetings, for those of you, there's a couple of you who are new since last year, the board meets every Thursday during the session up at the Capitol in room 30 from about noon to 1:30. And during those meetings, we'll discuss different bills. We'll give an overview of kind of the top education bills. It also is an opportunity for you all, if you have a bill that you know that you would like us to be prepared to present or discuss before that Thursday meeting, feel free to reach out to Jeff or I, and we can be prepared to provide an overview of that bill and kind of set the stage for discussion. But those meetings are a time for you to be more informed, more engaged, and potentially take a position of support or to request an amendment or potentially oppose a bill if you'd like. In addition to our Thursday meetings, the first Thursday of the session in the morning, we'll have a breakfast with legislators. We send out an invite, and it's just an opportunity for legislators and board members to talk about education issues. We've done that every year for the past 4 or 5 years, and we will do that again on January 30th. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, I'll try not to take too much more time, is that the legislature has a really great tracking service. If you're interested in kind of getting real-time email messages on bills that you're very interested. So let's say HB 99, for example, is a bill that you're very interested in. You want to go to committee meetings, you want to watch the floor debates. You can come here to the tracking service. It's on the legislature's main page. If you go to bills, you'll see tracking service right there. You can enter your email in here and you can select bills that you are interested in. And the legislature's system will send you updates when that bill gets set onto a committee calendar, for example. And it's a good way to track bills that might be of most interest to you. And if you have any questions regarding how to use the website and this tracking service, Jeff is a really great resource. I am as well, but oftentimes Jeff's easier to get a hold of than I am. So that's kind of the general overview of the session before we go into the policy requests, the 5 new ones. Do any of you have any questions about just that before we move on to the 5 requests?
I'm not saying any, so please continue.
Oh, that's a good point. Michelle brings up a good reminder that during the session, we will have a shuttle that will be available on those Thursday meeting days. If you do want to come park here, and then we'll have to go in kind of phases because we usually only have one van, but you can get a ride up to the Capitol and back from our office if you want to park here instead of trying to park up at the legislature. And more details on that will come. We only do that during the session, obviously. So it's because the parking's a bit of a nightmare up there. So while I am getting the policy requests up, do you want to just start by discussing one of them? Because you've got it there.
And I'll just add very quickly, with the tracking page, there's also a legislative app if you're more of a phone person like I am, and you can get live text updates of your bills as well. So you can create the login online, create your personalized tracking sheet. When you go into a bill, on the right-hand side, there'll be a Track This Bill button. And so when you log in on your phone, you'll have that list available as well, and you can get text updates, which for me is easier. In starting with legislative requests, we'll jump down to number 3. And I'll also do you all a favor and say we're not going to do number 5. Just got word that we need to pull that one for now, so we'll just do the first 4. But number 3 is unique in that it is not a legislative bill request. It is actually an appropriation request, and it is seeking your support for a different agency to get money. You might be asking, why on earth do I care about a different agency getting general fund money, by the way, not education fund money? Well, this request hopefully is familiar. Back in October, Representative Handy came and presented to you with our child nutrition staff, providing information at that time on seeking general fund money that the Department of Agriculture is going to get from the general fund. So again, this is not education fund, and this is a different agency seeking the money. The nice thing about all of this is, at the end of the day, if they are successful, they will give you the money. So that's always nice. Someone else does the work for you and takes it from a different account. So that's always great. What we're asking for today is official position of support for this request from the Department of Agriculture to seek the $275,000 to provide to us to do grants for LEAs to buy local food from local farmers here in Utah. So hopefully that rings a bell in terms of what, from the October presentation. We are looking for the official position of support from the board so that staff here can coordinate and work with and collaborate with the Department of Agriculture as they move forward on seeking this ask. So that in and of itself might even be its own separate motion, Chair, because it will be a position of support from the board from these other three requests that we're asking for, because the other
We can-
three will be
we can
bills.
separate it out. Board Member Belknap.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that we support the Utah Department of Agriculture in this ask. I don't know if I need more detail than that.
Is there a second? Give it to Sean. He is fast with that hand and not on that button, but discussion to the motion? And the motion is to support this item number 3, the ask to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Discussion to that motion, Board Member Earl?
Yeah, and maybe I missed it somewhere. Is there details about who is this Digital Citizenship and Wellness Commission?
That is a separate bill request. We'll get to that one in a
Okay.
moment.
I'm not seeing any other discussion on this, so let's vote on it. And the motion before the board is that we support this item number 3, request to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. So let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Please continue.
We'll jump down to number 4 now, in response to the question asked. This is actually a bill that is in process, and we have been contacted by the legislator and the associated vendors that want to work on this bill, and they want us to be at the table as well. What this is it would be a bill by Representative Stratton to create a Digital Citizenship and Wellness Commission, with the idea of a commission that would meet on a regular basis to look at the issue of digital citizenship at an education level as well as a community level. They're looking at going beyond just a K-12 environment, bringing in other state agencies that might have some type of intersection with educating the public on digital wellness and digital citizenship. So the details are very fuzzy at this point, but the idea would be that there would be a commission. We would have a seat on that commission, and they would make recommendations on a regular basis to the legislature for policy-related issues on digital citizenship and wellness.
The way I see this, it's kind of being, it is fuzzy, but it's kind of assuring a seat at the table if this moves forward.
Correct.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
I guess we wait, and if someone's going to move it forward, then we would make a comment at that time, because I would not support this without the details. So, is that the idea?
Board Member Davis?
Is there a cost?
I would imagine there will be a cost. They haven't even determined at this point which agency would staff the commission. There have been multiple agencies, ourselves included, that have been mentioned as potentials. But right now, they're trying to iron out all of the details. So the motion of support would be to allow staff to be engaged in the drafting process and to go to the meetings and whatnot so that we can kind of get more information and provide feedback.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
So I think that almost answered my question. So, because this feels almost like that last thing, are we looking for support for a bill, or are we looking for direction that allows you to help draft this bill?
The latter.
Okay.
Board Member Lear?
And just to one person's opinion, if this comes out of the general fund, I'd be completely supportive. Not so much, comes from the education fund.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Right now, I'm not seeing a motion of support or,
All right. apparently we are pulling number 5, so we won't take your time to discuss it for now. We'll bring it back to you if needed. So we'll go back to number 1 and 2. So number 1 is an amendment that is related to a recent case that you all may remember, where an educator had a relationship of a sexual nature with a student who was no longer a minor, but not at their school. So they were involved with an extracurricular activity within their district, the educator was. And so if you look at 53E-6-604, it talks about the state board investigating instances or allegations of an educator who's engaged in sexually explicit conduct with a student who is not a minor and enrolled in a school where the LEA or educator was employed, wherein we would like to ask for that school to be changed to LEA or to say LEA or involved in an extracurricular activity that, in this instance, the educator had access to the student through like a sporting activity, and that's where the grooming took place. So that's what number 1 would be, is seeking an amendment to that section of code with something, an amendment that's similar to that.
Okay, question, I believe, or something. Board Member Lear?
And I would support this if the student is still a student. I don't support it if it's a former student, so someone would have to
Yeah.
speculate that the grooming, defined or not, took place while the student was a public education student. So I would like to see the language in this before I would personally want to be supportive.
If you look at the sheet that's uploaded, it does still require them to be enrolled in the educator's LEA or an extracurricular program the educator's involved in. So they would be enrolled in the LEA or participating in an extracurricular program that the teacher, educator is supporting. So they would be a public education student, because I don't think you could have non-district or public education students participating in those extracurricular activities, but I could be wrong. But that is the intent, is to have the nexus with, yeah, and it does say student, yeah.
And I would just, like I said, I would still feel more comfortable seeing the bill as
No,
it's written
absolutely.
than the intent. Because even when you say participate in, what if it's a volunteer coach, youth coach, or, I'd want to keep I would personally want to keep that to be a narrow clarification.
Sure. And
Well,
this
it's not
would-
written yet. so
Yes,
that's
this
why we're
would
having
just be an again, this is us making sure you're okay with us seeking a bill file to get it written, and then, of course, we'd bring the bill language
Correct.
back to you once it gets drafted.
And especially if it gives you more control over what the language says.
Yes,
And thank you for the backup
Okay.
sheet.
yeah. Should I go to number 2?
Yes, please.
So the last year or so, or maybe even longer, Superintendent Jones could clarify, our staff has been working with LEA representatives on amending and clarifying our necessarily existent small schools program and funding distribution formula. And they've been working on the rule, which I believe has been moving forward. Ben Rasmussen has been working with that group along with others. And based on the work of this group, there are some elements in code that don't match our current practice. And so the bill would be to seek some amendments to statute to reflect what we'll be doing in our board rule and what our current practice is.
Any questions? Board Member Belknap?
I'd like to make a motion that we support our staff working with the legislatures on number 1 and 2, moving forward.
And 4.
Okay, that's
And
that's
4.
fine.
And 4, sorry.
And we have a
No, just
a
one.
motion and a,
No, I just want to do 1 and 2.
yeah, that's what I thought you was gonna.
Yeah, 1 and
Because
2.
it was gonna change.
Yeah, sorry.
Good, so let me restate the motion and see if your second's good. The motion is to to approve staff to work on those legislative requests on 1 and 2. Okay, is your second still good, Board Member Marsh? Okay, discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear?
My question is, and maybe this, given that you're working on it, maybe that's self-explanatory, or should be for some of us. But do the rural superintendents who receive this NEST money also agree that there are conflicts and it would benefit by being cleaned up or straightened out, or whatever you want to say?
Right, Chair, as part of the work group, there were rural superintendents that represented there. So we feel confident that, everybody supports where we're at right now with it. There's still work to be done, but
Okay.
yeah, we were very inclusive of the work group.
And the work group is supporting to have this activity done.
Yeah,
It's
we
just-
checked with them first.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Not seeing any further discussion, so let's vote. And the motion is to have staff continue to work, or to work on our legislative proposals for our consideration, numbers 1 and 2. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Board Member Davis.
Chair, would this be an appropriate time to move that we support HB 67 as presented by
This is the time to
Representative
do it.
Ballard?
Is that your motion?
I move that we support HB 67, Local Education Agency Financial Information Systems.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And the motion is to support the House Bill 67, Local Education Agency Financial Information System. Discussion to the motion, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Does that motion assume that we would prioritize the $4 million under, like, at a number 5 type thing? Is that the assumption with the motion?
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was rehearsing this in front of the mirror this morning and woke my wife up. So, this is, I was thinking about this. I said, what are you going to respond to if we say we add it to priorities? I think your vote enough is to support it. I think that if you want to, you can, but I don't think that you necessarily need to add it per se to your list. I think just, that it's in the legislative channels. Angie, your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't think we're right or wrong either way, but, the vote of the board is enough for that, so, yeah.
My response would be this motion is about supporting the bill.
Yeah.
And that if you would like to make a motion to support or prioritize the fiscal request in a moment, when we talk about fiscal requests, those would be two separate things. But I do think that Representative Ballard, of course, would like both, and the strength in both would be stronger than one, but right now, I think your motion right now would be about supporting the bill. And then the result of that is that here on our tracking sheet, we would put, next to HB 67, we would put a support, that the board has taken a motion of support for this bill. And then it would also give staff more leeway to engage and work with Representative Ballard and other legislators as they work on this bill on the Hill.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Dr. Dixon?
Just wanted to add to Angie's comment about the prioritization. I think as we get into the session every year, those of you that have been through this process will recall that things get added on, and you can spend a lot of time at each of your meetings moving everything around, but at the end of the day, as it gets closer and closer to prioritizing, and there are fiscal notes attached to bills, that changes a lot through the session. So keeping a list and things that you support and having that on the list is always helpful from a visual standpoint for our legislative partners. Back in our December meeting, we were trying to get priorities to the governor's office, and you've seen that budget come out. So I think it's always important to have things on a list, but that prioritization of those as we move through the session and it gets down to the wire, because we're then called on behind the scenes to say what are the board's priorities given what we have in funding. So hope that clarifies how that plays out in real time.
And that's the other reason that we have, one of the other reasons that we have our legislative board meetings to discuss this as the evolution, the marathon takes place there up on the hill. Board Member Earl.
Maybe this is a clarifying question. So when we vote to support a bill and then it changes, which they often do during the legislative session, do we re-vote again? I'm trying to remember in my mind, or
We,
would we have to bring that up as a motion, or once it gets changed, we would do you know what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
just because we support something and then, I've known bills, and I'm sure you've known this too, you get behind something and then it only takes one line to go, I'm out, but how does that, just remind me, because I'm trying to remember.
On our list, we will put that you support HB 67. And then if a first substitute came out,
Okay.
we would have you relook
Okay,
at that in a legislative meeting, and then we would put first sub, second sub.
Okay, I was just trying to
So-
remember how we did it, so,
we
okay.
can green light and we can put a red light on
Okay,
it
perfect.
weekly during
That's what I
that,
wanted.
during the session. And a yellow, yeah. Okay, Board Member Lear.
My comment was just pretty much an extension of Board Member Earl's comment. I feel differently about supporting Representative Ballard's bill because the staff has already been working with her. She's been good enough to consult you. And it's still very early in the process and the session, but you've been involved all along, so I feel pretty confident in supporting hers. I don't always feel comfortable in supporting very early concepts and bills because as Jenny said, if it says from the education fund, suddenly, seems a small change, but it's a big deal to me. So that's why I would personally rather see the language of bills before I support.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further discussion. The motion for the board is to support HB 67. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
That concludes the portion on policy requests, and so
I don't think we have any other, do you have any other items, loose ends here before we
can
go
I
to?
ask one question? Just, I think based on the motion, we understood that the direction is that number 4, we do not want
It
staff.
did not have any, there was no motion on number 4.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's the code? Chair, will you invite Del Frost up from the,
And also-
Please.
what's the code on that?
Trying to see it. There's no code.
Oh, so you're already connected in? Okay, okay. No, we're good.
Cindy, do you have a, well, you have a quick, Board Member Davis?
I have a motion for this section that we're starting now.
Okay, let's get, can we get a,
I can wait.
will you turn your light back on and then I'll catch you, but I think we want to have a quick overview. Okay, we're ready.
Right. So, again, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. Purpose of this agenda item is to continue our development of what is an iterative process leading into the legislative session. I've described to you in much detail the timeline that's related, the key deliverables, i.e., or for example, the submission to the governor's office of your budget proposal. So from last meeting to this meeting, from your December meeting to this meeting, there's been a whole bunch of different activities that have occurred that Dell is going to orient you to, including some actions that the Executive Appropriations Committee took. And then, as you all know, the governor released his budget proposal to the legislature, to the public, yesterday at around 10:30 a.m. So we're tracking that, and we're going to offer the side-by-side comparison with what you proposed as part of this agenda item. We always begin with the end in mind. The end is also, too, to facilitate, based on some of the activities that occurred in Executive Appropriations Committee, for you to pause and take and reflect on some time here to further develop your priorities, and we can accommodate that process, but we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. So, Chair, if it pleases you and the board, I'll turn it over to Mr. Frost to catch us up or orient us to where we're at as of this date time group.
Okay, I've got to deal with the situation here.
Okay.
And so Vice Chair Brittany Cummins will, if you'll direct things to her, I'll appreciate it. I'll be right back. You can use my computer.
Chair, if I may. Good morning, members. Dale Frost, Fiscal Policy Analyst for the board. As Scott said, a lot has happened, and I'll try to hit the highlights and then answer any questions you may have. So the first big thing that happened was after the December board meeting, the Executive Appropriations Committee met, and the relevant pieces of information are on the screen. They calculated after tax reform what they deemed as available education fund revenues. And you can see there's 113 million one-time, 214 million ongoing, so about 330. And that includes both public ed and higher ed, however the legislature wants to allocate those revenues. Additionally, they allocated certain adjustments into the base budget. And if as you are probably aware, the base budget is the foundation upon which budgeting for the next year works. And so it's not money that is yet appropriated, but it is very, very likely to be appropriated fairly early in the process. So for fiscal 20, there were 2 appropriation changes. One was to shore up the statewide online education program. You'll remember about that issue. And then the other is in 3 pieces. It was a motion to include student enrollment growth, which was the board's #1 priority, already in the base budget. So that is essentially included in the budget. The Public Education Subcommittee or the EAC would have to make a motion to take that back out. And so there are 3 pieces. There's a one-time piece of $5 million, and the board or the EAC chose to allocate the local revenue offsets, which are about $34 million, but only on a one-time basis. And then the fiscal 21 ongoing, and that's the student enrollment growth number that we had talked about before. So what's important is the 2 pieces here is about $330 million total education fund revenues for both higher ed and K-12, and that enrollment growth was included in the base budget. So any questions about the EAC actions? So if I can move on to questions?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here, yes.
I'm just in queue.
Okay, sorry, put your light back on, sorry. Okay, there are no current questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. And so the next piece, the governor's budget was released yesterday. And so I prepared a comparison with the board's adopted budget requests, all of the requests, not just prioritized requests, and the recommendations of the governor's budget. And so I'll go through this, and then I can take questions during or after this part of the presentation. So total requests from the board are $412 million. That's all of the requests that you have reviewed and approved of at this time. What was included in the governor's budget was $230 million, 11 million of which was one-time and non-lapsing balances. So the majority and this does not include local revenue pieces, this is just education fund and general fund pieces. So breaking that out and comparing that by the categories, in the budget tracker, you can kind of see that there are significant differences in certain areas. And so I'll kind of quickly walk you through what these are, and then you'll see in the following tables the detail for this. So category 1, which includes the increase to WPU value and enrollment growth, it's essentially the same with the major difference that the governor included a 4.5% increase, where the board has supported a 6% increase in the WPU value. There are some slight differences in offsets, but that's the big difference between the 222 million and the 168. If you remember, we broke out into category 2 those budget requests that are directly aligned to the strategic plan. And only one of those requests were included in the governor's budget, which was OEK, optional, the early kindergarten, the full-day kindergarten for 40% of students. And then in category 2 or 3, which is the flow-through programs, so the program maintenance, there was funding for the teacher, the TSSP. I'm trying to remember all these acronyms here, I'm sorry. The Teacher Salary Supplement Program, the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Program, there was 2.3 million allocated there, and then $500,000 to the NEST program, the Necessarily Existent Small Schools. And then the 10.2 million in 3B, that is the Computer Science Initiative. So those were the major USBE budget requests that were included in the governor's budget. And then the governor also fully funded the request from USDB. So let me go very quickly through the next.
Let me just.
Yes, go ahead.
So let me just make sure to, so between your last meeting and this meeting, obviously revenue became more clear, right? By way of what the Executive Appropriations Committee did. So the tailoring of or what the governor's office or the governor released is in line with what was determined by Executive Appropes. I just want to, I know Dale said that, but I just want to emphasize that with you because it's going to make a difference in how we proceed here in a few minutes.
So the next slide simply shows the difference that I mentioned, the 4.5% WPU versus 6%. And one of the things we did was when we made this presentation, we reached back out of the governor's office and trying to provide full information to the board. They did want to emphasize the fact that that 4.5% is higher than the last 5 fiscal years, what was actually appropriated. The highest has been 4% since fiscal 16. It's been between 3% and 4%, though it's not clearly 6%. Enrollment growth, these are technical differences other than a few more offsets, and the offsets were ongoing from the governor's budget, unlike the legislature's. So as you can see here, optional enhanced kindergarten was the only approved budget request from category 2A. The Utah School Leadership Initiative was the other prioritized request from the list from our December meeting. Moving to category 3, in both 3A and 3B, you'll see that TSSP is fully funded, and then Beverly Taylor Sorensen is at the 2.3 million level, and that computer science is fully funded in the governor's budget. And then the USBE internal requests, none of those were included in the governor's budget. And then USDB was fully funded. So there's also this other, what else did the governor include in education beyond what were the board's requests? And these are the 5 items here. The school nutrition program, the underage drinking prevention program, these are not really program advancements or policy changes. These are simply to reflect the changes that happened in the tax reform bill, moving from the liquor tax and other funding sources to the education fund. The 3 that really are more budget items are an apprenticeship program for students experiencing intergenerational poverty, operational excellence staff for schools. This would be 1 staffer in every school district and 2 for charter schools to focus on helping improve operational, make operational improvements similar to what the governor's office has for state agencies, and I can talk to you with more detail about that. And the compensation increases, these are in line with the recommended compensation increases for other state agencies. And that's the 19 million that's outside of the governor or the USBE budget requests. So that concludes the comparisons and information sharing. We are prepared if the board wants to prioritize additional budget requests because enrollment growth was included, you have essentially 4 priorities that have not been included in the budget. So you may want to include a 5th, but that is up to you on how much and if you want to continue to prioritize. So we have that availability today.
And Chair, if I may, if you recall, we did scenarios based on 250, 350, 450. Now that we have the revenue amounts that are available to us, right? You know, we're really closer to the 250, 350 scenarios, right? I mean, would you agree, Dale? You know, so we're between those. So, you know, we can do that same exercise where if this, then it would result in this amount going down or up, or, you know, we can do that with you, that process with you here today. Ultimately, with the end, you know, always beginning with the end in mind, we always experience at some point during the legislative session, the legislature comes to us and says, all right, you know, here's what the revenue is, you know, what's the board's priority. So this is, again, this is an iterative process. So, you know, there's always, you know, to Board Member Earl's question about bills, right, and if they change, well, revenue availability could change, like, you know, to Superintendent Dixon's point and all that. So we will continue this iterative process with you and during your weekly meetings. You know, you meet Thursday on the Hill, every Thursday on the Hill, beginning on January 30th, so.
I'm going to go to Board Member Earl really quick for just a question. Sorry. I'm not used to this on my left, sorry. Here you go.
So my question has to do with the underage drinking money that they've, you know, the tax they put on there. It's when they originally, and I don't know whether you know for sure, but when they originally put the bill forward, I'm sure they advocated, the reason why it was beneficial to put this tax on alcohol was because it would benefit the teaching of children about the alcohol prevention, abuse and such. And so I guess I'm a little confused, and I know this was what the legislature did, but why are they moving it to general fund so that we don't, it's not attached to what it was passed with? Does that make sense? It just seems to be disingenuous or something.
Member Earl, that is a great point. And it does disconnect the funding source from the program. But that was part of the tax reform changes, and it's my understanding that both the school nutrition program, the underage drinking prevention program, were to free up space in the general fund. But that would be a question that would have to go to the legislature. And the other piece I want to say about the underage drinking prevention program, we do have a business case, and that's about providing some programming in the elementary grades. That's not part of this. This was simply to move the funding source. That's a separate and distinct policy discussion that is not part of the governor's budget.
And Chair, if I may, I think we'll get more clarity when the session starts on all the different moves that occurred. I've reached out to the LFAs, and we've asked or requested that Jonathan Ball and Andrea Wilco come to your January 30th meeting and really provide more in-depth discussion on the SB 2001 changes. So, right, yeah, and so we've asked that point, or asked them to address your question as part of that, as long as the board approves putting them on your agenda for January 30th. So we're moving. We're ahead of it.
And I was just going to add, it's exactly that. The legislature just wanted to have more general fund revenue that then they can spend on other entities other than education.
Okay, Board Member Cindy Davis.
Can I make a motion, Chair?
Yes.
I move that we remove the $3 million in scholarship money in the school leadership program and move the personalized learning ask into priority 5.
Is there a second? Okay, so the motion is to remove the 3 million from the 3 million scholarship ask from the leadership line, right? Sorry. And to add the individualized learning asks to priority line 5. Okay. Okay, is there any
And I'd like to speak to the motion.
are you looking for a category number, like 2A, 2B? So the individualized learning was personalized, so it was 2C, is that the one?
2C,
Okay,
yes.
2C, adding 2C to line 5 and removing from, so that was 2D, just removing the $3 million portion of that. So leaving that where it is, but removing a $3 million portion that was specific to scholarships. Okay. Is there any discussion to that motion? Any, Board Member Belknap or Cannon, did you have questions on that motion? Or are you in line for something else? Okay, seeing no discussion on that motion, the motion before us is to remove the $3 million scholarship from the, from 2D, from the 2D request on line 4, and add to line 5 the 2C. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, Board Member Cannon?
Thank you. I always feel like it seems like every year we do this a little differently, and we're looking at different things in different orders. So
It's getting better.
I have a request, and it involves Category 3B, Flow-Through New and Expanded Program. And I would like to pass this around, please. This is a program, the University of Utah Reading Clinic. It is not a large amount of money. They're asking for $325,000 of ongoing money. And this is money that's all about literacy. The Reading Clinic was created by the legislature in '99, and it's
Board
provided
Member
services.
Cannon, are you planning on making a motion?
I am. Should I
Can you
make
make the
a-
motion
Yes.
first and then speak
My
to it?
motion would be that we move the University of Utah Reading Clinic underneath Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program for ongoing money.
So, just a clarification, if you're adding it, Beverly Taylor Sorensen is currently not on our priorities list. That I understand correctly, it's on a separate list, unless you want to correct that. So go ahead.
Okay, well, so the confusion comes from where they've given us.
Okay, go ahead.
To clarify, there was 2.3 million for Beverly Taylor Sorensen, including the governor's budget.
Right.
But it is not on the list of priorities for the board. It is one of the many, the overall business cases that have been approved, but it has not yet been added to the list here.
All right, so then for board priorities number 7 and 8, could we put in the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program and underneath it, the University of Utah Reading Clinic?
And Chair, sorry to add one more clarification. There are actually two business cases for Beverly Taylor Sorensen. It's the only one for the same program. One is maintenance because of increases in teacher salaries. That was the $2 million piece. And then one is the statewide expansion. That's the $16 million
Okay.
piece.
So I believe I would like to have the statewide expansion, because every month we come here and we see what Beverly Taylor Sorensen is doing with integrated learning and bringing the arts to our schools. They have not been able to expand. So that means that there are many students in our state that are not having the opportunity to engage in the arts and learning that Beverly Taylor Sorensen offers. So I think that's an important program, and it just breaks my heart to think that we're not willing to fund that program for other students in the state of Utah. So I'd like to see that one placed there, and then underneath it, the University of Utah Reading Clinic, which is actually a statewide program, although it carries the moniker of the University of Utah.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to place the Beverly Taylor Sorensen program, both parts, both
Yes.
requests on line 7, and the University of Utah
Both are
Reading
ongoing.
Clinic on line 8. Any discussion to that motion?
May I speak to my motion?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I've already spoken a bit to Beverly Taylor Sorensen. But I'd like you to recognize the University of Utah Reading Clinic. So it serves the entire state. It has been in charter schools and school districts, youth in custody facilities, and they've even helped USDB. They teach teachers how to deal with students who are having a terrible time with reading. And they have been incredibly successful at doing this, particularly with students who are dyslexic. And if you think, I'm a mother of a dyslexic child, and if you think what it means to a child to have that ability to read in the world throughout their life, it's an incredible opportunity. Currently, there are 19 Title I schools waiting for help from University of Utah Reading Clinic. There are over 1,000 children on their wait list for this kind of help. So I would like to support that by prioritizing them. Thank you.
Please raise your hand if anyone on the list wants to speak to this motion. Okay. Board Member Earl?
I guess maybe you kind of answered that question. I wondered how expansive the reading program was for the whole state, so to speak, where we're making a prioritization. And that's the other, just a little bit of a concern I have, is that we're putting it up above all these others. Not that it doesn't serve, not that it doesn't do great things, but you're saying that there are entities that are on the board, are waiting in line to get on to this. What exactly does that mean, I guess, is what I'm curious. Do you, okay.
Board Member Cannon, can you please push your button and I'll get your mic on.
Invite Karen Morgan to come and respond to this question, who might do a better job than I can.
Yes.
I guess I'm just wanting to know how is it just Salt Lake area, or, how expansive is this, so.
Just 1 second.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. The outreach is statewide. The base clinic is located in Murray, about 5,300 southwest of the freeway interchange there. But the outreach is across the state because of a distance lab that we have located there in the base clinic. And so the clinic serves children all over the state. We have worked with teachers and students, like in Big Water, over in Monticello. There's a lot of work being done up in Ogden, in the Ogden area. There's a lot of work being done in the southern areas of the state. I don't have my list in front of me.
You're okay. I think you gave me what I needed to know. I just wanted to make sure we weren't just serving one area and putting it as one of the top priorities. So you answered that question.
Absolutely.
So
It's a
thank you.
statewide clinic.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Lear?
Thanks. I wanted to support both parts of this motion, which I understood was about, again, two entities. To the reading portion, I was one who misunderstood how broad-based this service opportunity is. And when I have gradually processed this for a couple of years to understand that, I was very impressed. It also goes to my concern that teaching is rocket science, that when you're teaching gifted high school students, it's not so much, but when you're teaching non-English speaking kids on the west side of Granite District, it absolutely is. And to that point, my daughter's mother-in-law is a reading coach on the west side of Granite, and she said, is pretty politically uninvolved. We were talking over the holidays, if you do nothing else, protect that reading clinic, because it's so beneficial to the teachers that I work with and my students. As to Beverly Taylor Sorensen, I think we have really been so fortunate to have their generosity, the family's generosity, for many, many years, to the tune of millions of dollars, and we've seen the benefits of this and the expansion of it, even given the fact that we have not, as a board or as a state, we've thought, well, as long as they're giving it, why should we make it a funding priority for taxpayers, and it absolutely should be. At this point, this family has proven its focus and its willingness to serve our students, and I absolutely support both of those. Thank you.
Board Member Newell.
Yes, I want to speak to the University of Utah Reading Clinic. As we all are aware, reading is fundamental, and every aspect of education pivots off of the ability to read. And it's important that we support and expand programs like this that help students to get that foundation that allows them to be able to cognitively accept and absorb the information that comes from other aspects of education. So I just wanted to make sure that we emphasize that this is a great opportunity for us to truly impact our educational system. Thank you.
I guess I'm gonna catch up here. You have a motion or anything on the table? Okay. Okay, there is one? Yes. Okay, Board Member Belknap?
Chair, if I may clarify one piece about the motion?
You bet.
So the 16 million is the cost to expand to all elementary schools statewide. There's included in the business case a 5-year phase-in, which may be more in terms of finding all the qualified personnel to ramp up this program. That's just another option for the board to continue. It would be a commitment to expand statewide, and in the first year, it would cost $4.5 million. That's included in the base as another option in that business case. The 16 would be to fund full expansion in 1 year, if that makes sense. And so there are just a couple options about Beverly Taylor Sorensen that the board should be aware of that are included in there for your consideration.
Okay. Board Member Belknap? What's that? Who did I delete? You. Okay. Okay. It was you? I'm sorry. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I move to split the motion.
We have a motion to split. Or second? Second. Okay.
So the current motion
Did you,
had the Beverly Taylor Sorensen.
okay, we're gonna do 7 first, okay. So I believe the motion on the table, because it's split now. Oh, no, we didn't vote, sorry.
Chair, Chair, if I may, can
You
we just
bet.
make one more additional clarification for the board, benefit of you and the board related to the Beverly Taylor Sorensen? We think this is very important to ensure that everybody's aware of what the plan is or the programming of the funding is. So, go ahead, Jennifer. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, just to clarify on the Beverly Taylor Sorensen, Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. The request has a scale-up system. So to get $16 million of professionals out in schools in the arts may not be able to happen in 1 year. So in the business case, it's a 5-year scale-up plan with about 5.1 million needed on top of the 2.3 for growth to be able to kind of start scaling at a reasonable rate that we can acquire arts teachers. So it'd be great to go to 16 million. Our concern with staff would be, can we get that many teachers the first year out the gate? Probably going to be difficult, but if we know over time it's going to scale, it makes it a lot easier. So the intention for this year of priority would be 5.1 million plus the 2.3 for growth.
7.4 for the program.
So a total of 7.4 million would be what, if you choose to prioritize this, is what we would be really asking for, with the intention of this would not be the end of the path, but just the beginning of moving towards that more full amount.
Okay, well, let's do the split first. So we have a motion to split the motion into the two. Is there any discussion on the split? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand for the splitting the motion. Okay, we have Board Member Marsh, Board Member Hanson, Board Member Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Earl, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. The motion passes, so it's split. Okay? All right, so the motion on the table is, will be to move, help me understand this, to have Beverly Taylor Sorensen, the 7.4 million, to be number 7 on the legislative ask. Okay. So that is the motion to, we're speaking to that motion. You're not wanting to speak to this one, but it'll be the next one, or?
My previous motion did not detail the amount 7.4 million. So since you detailed it in what you're presenting to the board, I'm good.
Okay. I recognize that, but I based on what they were saying here, I made that assumption, so, okay, thank you. Board Member Belknap? What's that? She's waiting. Oh, okay. I'm not seeing any discussion to the motion, so let's vote. The motion before the board is to move Beverly Taylor Sorensen legislative, or no, the request, 7.4 million, to item to number 7 on our prioritization list. Is that correct? Yes. I was not on the, okay. Okay, so that will be number 7. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It passes. One. Were you opposed? Oh, okay, 2 opposed. Okay. The next motion is to have University of Utah, the 325,000, that right? To be moved to number 8. So to move, the motion is to move U of U reading clinic request to number 8. Got it. I've got it right up here. Okay, discussion to that motion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Okay. Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. All of us have programs that we love and that we want to prioritize, and I really had to write this down so I didn't forget. However, we're asking for more things and prioritizing more items than there is money available. And so if it would be okay, I'd really like to ask Dale or Scott, really, we already know that we're somewhere between 250 and 350, and yet on our list, we have 422. It doesn't add up for me, and I think we really need to think about this as a group. What is it, can we change, what can we do differently so that we're asking for items that they can really fund?
Okay, so here's a question that I anticipated in the mirror and rehearsed as well. So we've configured, and I mean that respectfully, I really do. We've configured this, we configured this to show you that based on your priorities where you're at. So your requests right now amount to 277 million right now. So you can, your total, yes, you're spot on. All of them total 420 million, but this iterative process puts it to where, given what we know now, you're falling in right about the 277 million mark with these prioritizations. Does that help or make sense, or?
Okay, a follow-up, Board Member Belknap.
I'm sorry, I shut myself off. So we're at 277 now. However, even if we don't prioritize everything that we have and all our business case plans we think are important that we don't necessarily put in our priority list, and we have them over here where the legislature can look at them, we are way over budget. Correct?
Agreed.
Maybe not necessarily put them in a list of priorities.
well, we're over, if I may, Chair, to
Yes.
Board Member Belknap's question. We're over the amount of what we know at this date time group is the available revenue by way of what EAC did. You know, we encourage the staff to go into the session knowing that, but that there's always opportunity, there could be opportunity later on that that amount might change, right, for revenue based. You know, I don't think significantly or things like that, but that's why we go through this iterative process. Does that
I
help?
just
Go
want
ahead,
us to be
Dale.
conscious and
Yes.
aware
Yeah,
of where we're
I
sitting.
agree. I see what you're saying, so. You need to
And I
turn the mic
I apologize, I had to step out, but I just want to weigh in too, if I just could, as we're still, the lights are still on here, and we probably have more emotion. And that is, from previous experience, it's, especially when, as the legislature's first getting going, which is really super important, is to make sure you know what your top 5 is. And then I have seen where, when we get into 6, 7, and 8, and 9, and 10, and we've got those as priorities. I also have seen where the board changes that depending on availability of funds and also where we're having support on the Hill. So I just still throw caution. All of these programs, there's people attached to all of these programs, and as we're picking and choosing our highest priority, these are funding requests, but they take it personal, that my program isn't as good as this other. So I'm just sharing that with you. So I would throw that little bit of advice there as we're drilling down into the details of, I don't know if we're going to a top 10 or whatever, but go ahead.
Chair, if I may provide just some, again, going back to the numbers that I presented, it's a really difficult question to answer how much is really available, because there are so many moving parts and pieces. So the best I can do is tell you ranges. So again, the governor allocated $230 million new funding to public ed. The legislature believes there's $330 total to the education fund. You know, what the governor did was essentially allocate $100 million to higher ed. So if that mix changes, there's more funding for public ed. There's also on the spending side to the education fund that can have some changes. For example, if some higher ed funding was towards the general fund. So how much is really available to public ed? It's really difficult to say this is the number. But 230, we have a number there. We have the number 330. That's why we don't have a $450 million scenario right now. And we don't actually have a scenario. We just have a running tally. So it's up to the board on how much you want to prioritize. I just wanted to give, again, some context.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I'd like to move that we place early childhood grants for $3 million as priority number 7.
9.
7. So it would be in between.
sorry, I thought we-
That's okay. That it would be in between concurrent enrollment and Beverly Taylor Sorensen.
Sorry.
You're-
Excuse me.
It is under category 2A, the first section, early childhood grants.
Do you have that motion? Is there a second? Second. And she's getting it up. I want to restate it. Do you want to speak to the motion, please?
Yes, please. We currently fund preschool programs, and if there's some federal funding that is going away, and so if we don't ask for this request, there are current preschool seats that will be lost. And so this isn't a growth program or expanding program. This is a let's not lose ground on a program that's been moving forward.
Okay. Let's see, we're speaking to the motion. Board Member Lear.
This is sort of to the motion, so I think the opportunity might be lost, so I'm going to take the opportunity. And that is, I think there's just as much danger in under-prioritizing, because I've been interested to watch the legislature find money where it hears a strong outcry for it, suddenly $2 million to supplement the online program. I've also observed the legislature cutting based on different legislators' own priorities, half of Beverly Taylor Sorensen. So actually getting to that $300,000+ is, in my experience, unlikely, overshooting it, because legislators do their own cutting. But I like having, at least for myself, my priorities laid out in front of them and not assuming it's a zero-sum game. That's a strong feeling I have. So I don't feel like it's just a wish list. I think it is acknowledging that, A, you can find money if you want to, legislators, and that these are my priorities, and then, until they change, obviously, but then I see you legislators, cut certain programs, but my priorities are still in place. So, to Brittany's comment, I'm torn. I think that it's very strategic, Brittany, because it's really tough to choose between early learning and reading for all. And I don't know how to vote, but that's more to the earlier comment. I'm not willing to let go of my priorities because of other strategies and games. Thanks.
Board Member Davis?
I'm in queue.
What's that?
I'm in queue for a motion.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
So my concern, not necessarily the fact we're funding this, is the fact that the federal government gives us money to do something, then pulls the money, which requires us then to fill the void. So I guess in some ways we got to be careful what we're taking in the first place, because it will require the state to fund it down the road. Anyways, I just have concerns over doing that, or that I feel like it's it's very manipulative for a state to then pull funds that, anyways, so that's my comment.
Okay. The motion before the board is to place I'm repeating the motion so we can stay on this particular, to replace the early childhood grant for $3 million as a priority number 7 before the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Learning Program. Okay. Janet?
Motion.
Okay.
I'd like to amend it to put it as priority number 9 rather than 7.
We have a motion to move it to 9 instead of 7. Is there a second? Second. Discussion. Do you want to speak to the motion?
I think Brittany has a good point. We don't want to see things go away. It's just, I prefer the others being a higher priority than this particular one.
Any other discussion to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, let's vote on the proposed amendment to move it as priority. Motion to replace the early childhood grant for $3 million as priority number 9. Let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Well, the ayes, raise your hand. Board Member Cannon, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Davis, Board Member Newell, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Lear, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Earl. Motion passes. So motion before the board is to replace, motion is to place an early childhood grant for $3 million as priority 9. Any discussion to the motion? And we're running out of time. Just bringing that to your attention on our agendas today. So not seeing any discussion to the motion, so let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. We have 1 no. Okay. 2 no's. Thank you. Okay, Bolter and Earl. Okay, the only thing standing between us and lunch is this, so. Okay, Board Member Davis.
Well,
The
trust me,
pressure's on you.
I don't want to be in. I wanted someone else to do this.
I've got to have somebody else
motion.
besides myself looking at that clock.
I'm so internally conflicted, but because I feel so strongly about fixing that student transportation problem that's gone on for years and years and years and supporting that 3-year program. But I think that we need to I move that we move the local education agency financial information systems ask to number 2 and move everything else down
Move it to what?
to number 2 and move everything else down. I just think we have to get this system in place. We have so many problems and inconsistencies right now, and we have gone asking the legislature to support this, and they've come here today, and I just think we would probably be, as much as I'm struggling, but I think we would be remiss not to do it.
Is there a second? And you spoke to the motion. You want to speak again, some more? Okay. No? Okay. Any discussion to the motion? And the motion is to move the local education agency's financial education system ask to number 2 and move everything else down the list. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear.
I have comment in the form of a question to Scott.
You have a question?
He's been here longer, and Mr. Frost, who's newer, but, so may I ask that?
Yeah.
How, knowing what the rural, the area folks think, and knowing how important this system's, what's the word, improvement is, which would you think is the most important priority? Just your advice.
Priority
Just your
over
opinion. Oh, of the
system or
two.
transportation?
Yeah,
or
transportation versus the USIMS improvement.
Both?
No.
Yeah. No,
Can I
well,
vote that way?
Yeah. Well, so I think there's room to, can we talk about this? Let's talk about something that I think it adds value to this discussion. I know we're pressed for time, Chair, so let Dale expand a little bit on your ask for the WPU and what impact that has on transportation. That might help answer the question too, because I think we're going to get 2 wins out of this. So go ahead.
I'm all about Steve Covey.
Joe.
One of the other points the governor's office wanted to make, because they did not include the $5 million for transportation,
Right.
Was that doesn't mean that there's 0 increase for transportation in the governor's budget. So I ran the numbers, and as you know, there's a statutory goal of getting to 85% state funding of transportation costs, and we're not there. We're around 76%. So the governor's budget from, if the WPU were to increase the 4.5% and the enrollment growth, that would add $5.6 million to transportation, moving from 76 to 77%. If the USBE budget request for WPU and enrollment growth, so the 6% occurred, that would add 7.6 million and move that to 79%. If the 5 million were added to that, that's 12.6 million total transportation to and from that would go there from all these different sources, and that would move it up to 82.9%. So
Closer to the 85.
82.9% is if these priorities went in place as they are right now.
Right.
And so hopefully that gives you a little bit of context.
Right. So I would, and I'm sure they'll, let me know, they being the rural BAs, but I would think that the transportation, it's really, that right there in itself impacts the students directly, right? I mean, yes, the systems do as well, but it's more of an indirect process to them as well. So if they were having to choose between that, I would say they would probably, however, this is why I did want Dale to expand on what an increase to the WPU means, because I think we could really actually get both within the amount that we're given, by the legislature. I anticipate there will be an increase to the WPU, which will result in more money going towards pupil transportation, as stated by Dale. And then, there would be that ability to get at least the first $4 million of ongoing towards the systems. So I think we get a double win there. So, I can't really speak for every BA, but, I really feel that they would probably but go on the side of pupil transportation as a priority over systems. But I think they do recognize the value of both to the individual student, so.
Okay. Board Member Bolter?
So as far as the systems and the monies, isn't that part of Representative Ballard's bill
Yeah.
that we talked? So I feel like in voting to prioritize that bill or support that bill, that we've already said that this is a priority, and so I don't know that we necessarily have to bring it there.
Yeah. Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
that's where, my wife finally said, "Go, leave, get out of here," because you're standing in front of the mirror. That's a tough, it is, you're right. It's like kind of, well, the bill's been prioritized, so then does that mean the money would, goes along with it? Angie might be able to, Angie's not here. So, she might be able to, I think through the, to me, that's a dilemma, right? So we support the bill, then do we add the money in there? If the bill passes, then, right, then the money's going to be there too. So I think you've done that, by saying that you support the bill, at least as it is right now, to Board Member Earl's point earlier. So, that's a tough one, so.
Yunad?
Chair, if I, at danger of contradicting my boss, which
That happens all the time,
which is very
so,
dangerous,
yeah.
but shows that we're a learning organization. I would say that because of how the legislative process works, if House Bill 67
Yeah.
were approved, there will be a fiscal note that would have to go into the budgeting process.
Right.
It's not a $5,000 cost, it's a $4 million cost.
Right.
And so I do think that there is a strong argument for including it somewhere in the prioritizations.
And I'll weigh in. Does it?
No, I know. No, it's fine. It's fine.
No.
But if you do include it in the prioritizations, it's just an added emphasis on the fact that you do it. But, I just want to make sure you know that delineates or deducts, if you will, from the available fund. So right, yes, yeah. So, no, I know, it's not a contradiction. It's just
No.
additional support. Yeah, no, it's all good.
Chair, may I just add one thing?
You bet.
If the bill passes, one thing to remember, once it gets through the opposite house, which in this case would be the Senate, and it gets read the second time, it gets then held on a board, even if it passed the first
Yeah.
week of the session, to see if it's going to be funded. So just because you make take a motion of support for the bill could pass policy-wise all the way through, but then be held until it gets funded.
Funded.
So that second motion would help it get off of the board on that last week of the session.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just wanted to make
Vice Chair Brittany Cummings.
And I want to speak to the importance of us putting this on our prioritization list for our benefit as well, because if we prioritize something over here and say we want it, but we pretend like the money doesn't exist and we're watching this money add up, then I think we miss the personal honesty of how much money we are actually requesting. And so I think it's us visually seeing that we are supporting requests for a certain amount of money. And so I think it helps for us visually to add these bill priorities to our legislative budget priorities as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other discussion to the motion, and the motion before the board is to move the local education agency's financial education system ask to number 2 and move everything else down. So let's vote on that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. How many other? Okay, we have Janet, Board Member Lear, Board Member Gravitt. So the motion passes. We are out of time. we can certainly pick this up in our next.
Right, it's an
and-
iterative
and-
process,
and-
so,
let's keep,
you know, I think Angie and I are on tracking that we'll continue this agenda item as you meet on the Thursday meetings and keep it going,
Okay.
okay? Okay.
thank you. This concludes this portion of our day, but it ends our board meeting. We have another board meeting starting in 22 minutes, right back in here. So enjoy your lunch.